This conception of thought and action, engaged in a timeless struggle, is by itself by no means timeless. It is temporal and in fact of comparatively recent development. The Romantic idealists and their successors in philosophy, who have conceived thought and action, science and art, intellect and emotion, etc., as at each other's respective throats. Not only is it not a natural, universal thing to regard these antagonisms as fundamental, the antagonisms themselves are scarcely universal. There is no reason, for instance, for regarding thought and action as a biological phenomenon, as Freud does. Biological definitions of thought, on the contrary, indicate a unity. To be convinced that no such view of the relation between thinking and doing is universal, we need only glance through Ernst Cassirer's scholarly volumes on the Erkenntnisproblem and then recall that he treats only modern epistemologies. Aristotle, for instance, regarded bodily action as separate from and more or less irrelevant to genuine scientific thinking, which this might also be said of the nominalist tradition. That tradition gave the belief to a different content, one involving the bifurcation of nature and other sensationalist assumptions. But the Romantic idealists saw the relationship of act and idea in terms of vast and moving conflicts. And finally, some great Renaissance figures looked on knowledge as power. Thinking for them meant the domination of man over nature, a directed activity of control. On this Renaissance view of theory and action, there is neither opposition nor divorce, but complete and essential connection. Aristotle takes knowledge as passive contemplation, certain, complete, necessary, eternal, self-sufficing, final. On this view, which is the classic, most brilliantly elaborated sanction of the divorce between theory and practice, knowledge is also sharply separated from utility. It has nothing to do with making. Art, non-science, is making. Science arises only when all inventions have been established. Yet there is a parallel between these corresponding epistemologies. The medieval notion of hierarchical and unchanging order is clearly connected with the conception of knowledge as a beholding or reflection. Important to recall that magical control of nature is, in Elizabethan England, not clearly different from experimental science. Marlowe's friend Harriot, the great Elizabethan scientist, was regarded as a magician. Francis Bacon employs the phrase experimental magic in an appreciatory way. In Marlowe's Faustus, experimental science, magic, exploration, conquest, invention, and the will to be a god are all fused. What a piece of work is man! How noble in reason, how infinite in faculty, in form, and moving, how express and admirable in action, how like an angel in apprehension, how like a god. Hamlet shows us the eternal conflict of the ideal and the phenomenal. Hamlet illustrates the philosophic difference of the difference between appearance and reality. Perhaps this is the only philosophical problem. Wordplay. How is ambiguity related to indecision? Formal analysis, as we have said, takes words as things. Analysis of the representational elements takes them as signs. But signs have a number of different functions, and the word sign is itself ambiguous. Cloud is a sign for an actual cloud. It designates an atmospheric formation in the sky. But a cloud is also a sign for the coming of rain. The relations of designation and evidence are two very different things. Designation is always expressed, whereas the relations of evidence are not necessarily discursive. A literary work very often does not speak about all the things it is evidencing. Hegel remarks that all great world historical facts and personages occur, as it were, twice. He has forgotten to add, the first time as tragedy, the second time as farce. This is equivalent to saying that as far back as recorded civilization goes, men have been telling the same stories again and again, and their hearers responding in the same way, because human nature is almost eternally the same. Each myth is a fresh incarnation of the traditional on earth. We seek to know the moving of each sphere and the strange cause of the ebbs and floods of Nile, but of that clock within our breasts, the subtle motions we forget the while. We that acquaint ourselves with every zone and pass both tropics and behold the tolls, when we come home are to ourselves unknown and unacquainted still with our own souls. Not a whit we defy augury. There's a special providence in the fall of a sparrow. If it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be now, yet it will come. The readiness is all, since no man has aught of what he leaves. What is it to leave betimes? The fall of a sparrow represents an extremely successful combination of the classical symbol of divination by the flight of birds and the well-known biblical passage. The if-then form of the next three propositions, while it may be fortuitous in Shakespeare, is nevertheless a characteristic device of ancient Stoic doctrine. If it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. If we let N equal now and C equal to come, then we have Hamlet's statement as follows. N implies not C implies N, not N implies C. Now, these statements can scarcely convey any new information beside the fact assumed, namely that all men die. Yet their emotional force is enormous. If statement A is true, then it must be true. One is obviously tautological. Whatever is, is. Two, not at all so. But two says, whatever is must be. And this creates an emotional aura of fatality, the inevitability of all events. For example, if, as in Hamlet's case, A is an abbreviation for I am to die by dueling in a short while, then his efforts are irrelevant to the production or avoidance of the truth of A implies A, but not at all irrelevant to making A true or false. He can make A true by allowing the duel to take place, or he can make A false by taking Horatio's advice. But the unknown here is not life on earth, the mysteries of life, nor the proper time to die, but the time appointed for my death. Specifically, am I going to die today?